We'll make sure everybody gets theirs. I guess we'll start it. There you go.
30 people protesting taxes. She just had a mayor has
Okay, I guess it's 6 o'clock. I guess we go ahead and get started, and I just want to just take a minute to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to do this and to serve on this commission. Also, again, I'd like to thank the ad hoc committee that we had set up to come up with ideas to get it this far. The Board of Aldermen, that committee and the Board of Aldermen feel real strongly about the importance of this, how it could help our downtown area, develop some business, and maybe incentivize some people to do something with some properties in our downtown area. So there's certainly a lot of details that we haven't covered yet that I'm sure you're going to cover as far as boundaries go and what actually will end up being in the TIF. But I think the overall concept of what we come up with and how it will be financed and that is a good idea at this point, and really would benefit the city. So again, thank you. From here on out, it's Chauncey's meeting, and I'll sit down.
Really? Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and get started with this, and I guess I'll call the meeting to order. And why don't we, can we get a motion to accept the agenda?
Motion.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Why don't we go around the table and introduce ourselves. My name's Chauncey Buckheit. I'm Executive Director with the Southeast Regional Planning Commission, and the city has asked our assistance in putting this plan together.
My name is Shannon Creighton. I'm an attorney with Gilmore & Bell. We've been engaged by the city as special counsel for this project.
Mike Buck Jokers.
Okay. Sandra Cabot. I'm the president of the St. Jody County Community Foundation, and most recently with the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Southeast Missouri State University.
I'm Kathleen Waltz. I'm formerly a mayor in the city of St. Genevieve, formerly a mayor in the city of St. Genevieve, and a business owner in the downtown area.
Ron Inman, I manage Tower Rock Stone Company and sit on so many boards I won't even mention all of them. just
I'm Shelley Jokerst. I'm the superintendent at St. Genevieve School District.
Jason Schuck. Eric Bosler. I work at Bosler Finner Home, and I'm a board member of the St. Gen School District.
Terry Berthold, work at Bank of Bloomsdale.
Erica Palmer, Regional Planning Commission.
Tom Couch, I'm actively involved in a few different things in the city.
Bill Rogers, retired.
Thank you. Shannon is probably one of the foremost experts on TIFs in the state of Missouri, so we would like to have her go in and explain what tax increment financing is and also the role of the commission.
Thank you, Chauncey. That was a high order to fill. Again, my name is Shannon Creighton. I'm an attorney with Gilmore & Bell. Many of you, we've worked with the city, we've worked with the county and school district. Our firm specializes in municipal finance. We also assist cities and counties in working to implement economic development programs throughout the state. Again, we've been engaged by the city as special counsel to help them through this process. What I'd like to do now is just go through a very brief overview of what tax increment financing is. Some of you are familiar with it. Maybe some of you, this is a new area for you. I passed out before the meeting a packet, a little color clip at the top, you can see. The first page is obviously the agenda. The next item is a one-page memo on the role of the TIF Commission. And the next document is a more detailed memo of what I'm going to overview here in a minute. My overview is going to be very, very brief. If at all you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. I've also given you all a copy of my card with contact information. If you have questions at any time throughout this process, feel free to contact me, email me with questions. I'd be happy to answer. So again, just to get started, we're going to go through just an overview. Tax increment financing, also known as TIF, is probably the most widely known economic development program in the state. It's used by cities and counties to incentivize redevelopment of either blighted or conservation areas. Blighted areas, conservation areas, those are statutory definitions. Some folks feel like blight is in the eye of the beholder, but in fact, this TIF statute provides a very detailed definition of what constitutes a blighted area. In your memo, I've copied out the statutory definition, and it's available for you to look at. The next area is the conservation area, which we believe this area would be, we're going to be talking about, is going to be eligible to be a conservation area. Conservation area also has a specific definition in the TIF statute. It is not yet blighted, but it does show signs of physical deterioration. But more importantly, what changes it from a blighted area is that 50% or more of the buildings or structures in the area are 35 years or older. There's also a third area that could be eligible for as a TIF redevelopment area. It's called an economic development area. This type of TIF is not used very often. It's never been legally tested, so it's not used as often as the other two. Generally speaking, TIF authorizes a municipality to adopt a redevelopment plan for one of those areas, and then capture and divert existing sales taxes and property taxes to pay for a redevelopment project cost for up to 23 years. The plan that Chauncey is going to be talking about is the base document for a TIF. Once that plan is approved, the city, the assessed valuation in that area described in the plan is frozen in time, and any taxes generated from that assessed valuation, that level, which we call the base, the taxing districts in that area continue to receive that revenue. Now, once the project's in place and the area starts to be redeveloped, assessed valuations will increase, economic activity will start to increase within the area, and an increment is created. Now, by increment, there are two types of increment within TIF. One deals with real property taxes, and the other one deals with sales taxes. So, just briefly overview again, there's a base, which all the taxing districts will continue to receive that revenue, and then the increment. And the increment is treated differently for the type of tax that it is. On the real property tax side, the increment that's created once the assessed valuation increases over the base, 100% of those taxes can be captured and diverted to pay for the project. On the sales tax side, or the utilities tax side, the increment is called an economic activity tax, or an EAT. And those taxes, up to 50% of those taxes are captured. The remaining 50% of that increment goes back to the taxing districts that generated it. Okay? EATs, just one note on EATs. I know that within this proposed area, there are a lot of hotels, beds and breakfasts. EATs do not include any taxes imposed on the sale of hotel or motel rooms. They also do not include personal property taxes or special assessments. So taxing districts will get their base. They will get the 50% of the incremental sales tax that's generated, the new sales taxes that are generated. They will also continue to receive their personal property taxes, their special assessments, and any taxes generated on your hotel and motel rooms. Are there any questions about the financing and how that works at this point? Okay. So, excuse me. Now, once increments are generated, again, they're collected just like any other tax, but they're diverted and they're placed into a special allocation fund, which is held by the city. And those monies then can be used by the city to pay for the project costs that are going to be described in the plan on either a pay-as-you-go basis or to secure debt obligations that can be issued by the city. So either notes or bonds can be secured by that revenue source. Now, in order to implement a TIF, the first step is to create a TIF commission and prepare a redevelopment plan. Now, depending on where a TIF is in the state, a TIF commission, the makeup of a TIF commission might look different. Here, we've got 11 members, 6 of which represent the city, 2 represent the school districts in the area, 2 represent the county, and 1 represents all other taxing districts imposing a tax in the area. Now, once the TIF commission is created, the plan is prepared. And the plan, Chauncey's going to go in a lot more detail about this plan, but generally speaking, the redevelopment plan is the framework for the development. It gives a very general overview of what the project will entail. Any specifics would be set forth in a redevelopment agreement between the city and the individual doing the project. Okay? So the plan is supposed to be very generic. It's a framework. It also will have the estimated project costs, the amount of TIF assistance that would be available under this plan for the 23-year period. And it will also provide a cost-benefit analysis, which will show each taxing district what the cost and benefit to you all would be. One very important part of the redevelopment plan are the statutory findings that are required to be made. Probably the most important is what we call the but-for test. And that is a statement that says that but for the adoption of TIF, the area that we're going to be talking about is not reasonably anticipated to be subject to private investment and redevelopment. Any questions on that? Now, the main purpose of a TIF commission, and the reason you all have been appointed here today, is to review the plan and hold a public hearing. Within 30 days after that public hearing, you will be asked to make a recommendation to the city as to whether or not they should adopt the plan. Now, you are an advisory board only. The ultimate decision about whether or not the plan gets adopted is up to the city. Even if you recommend that they not approve the plan, they can, with a supermajority vote, override that recommendation. Okay? Now, once all of the project obligations have been paid in full, or the 23-year period has expired, the plan will be dissolved, the TIF will be dissolved, and all the taxes, all the increment will then go back to the taxing districts as normal. Are there any questions on that? Pretty high levels. There's a lot more to TIF than that, but if there's any questions, no? Before we turn it over to Chauncey, there are a couple housekeeping matters that I'd like to go through. You want me to do that? The first is, this is a city commission. The city has adopted Robert's Rules of Order as part of their, how they run their meetings. And so we would like you all to adopt Robert's Rules of Order as well. Are you all familiar with those? Those are parliamentary procedures. Okay. So if there's a motion and a second, discussion, and then a vote. Is there a motion to adopt Robert's Rules?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The next item is the election of officers. We do recommend that you all have a chairman, a vice chairman, and a secretary. The city clerk is here, and I do recommend that she be appointed as your secretary. She will be taking minutes along with Erica Palmer. We can do this as a slate, if you'd like to do that, or we can just nominate folks individually. Any volunteers?
I have a motion.
Okay.
I would propose it as a slate. I would like to recommend Tom Couch as our chairman and Phil Rogers as our vice chair and the city clerk as our secretary.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The next item, before we turn over to Chauncey, is the appointment of the custodian of records. I would propose, since the city clerk is your secretary, that she also be named as your custodian of records.
I would move on that. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. One final order. At this point, I'd like to ask, again, as part of your role as commission members, I'd like to ask, since the area we're talking about is rather large, is there anyone here that owns property or owns a business within the proposed redevelopment area?
Do you have something that has the boundaries you can pass
Yes.
around?
Sure.
Sorry about that.
You want some help holding this up, too? Put it on the board or something?
Sure,
So it's clear for anybody that knows, I haven't owned any property in the city for over 5 years this past December. Calling my daughter, I was questioned about that today.
Yeah, this is, give you a little bit of reference here. This is the marina property, and that, of course, is outside the city right now, but the hope is that will be coming in prior to adoption of this plan. And then far north as the, let's see, this is, help me out, this is where the switch yard is for Union Pacific, the levee. And this is the Built Best building. And of course, the majority of the historic district in downtown.
Yes.
What do the colors signify?
I'm sorry. That's the land use. Yellow is single-family residential. Public is the blue. Red is the commercial. And purple is industrial.
So is it unusual to have a TIF district with some of the proposed area lying outside the current city limits? I mean, you've seen these in other communities?
It'd have to be in the city before the city could adopt the TIF.
So part of the process would need to be to address
Right,
that?
right. Now, if that doesn't happen, then the boundaries will be amended prior to the public hearing, and any property outside the city will be taken out.
Is it unusual to have, around here we have a lot of what you would call floodplain, which is currently inside the levee, but it's still the flat land that we consider the floodplain. Is that unusual, or since we're a river community, is that not so unusual?
It's good. Go ahead.
I think, Sandra, if there was to be any development in the floodplain, then the elevation of the development would have to be raised above that for a variety of reasons and entities. But that area is taken into account for future development inside the floodplain.
If I may, with the exception of the areas that are designated within the levee as flowage easements, there can be no development on them of any kind.
And that's a good point. There's some legislation in place also that prohibits, development within the floodplain.
Right.
And Shannon, you might want to address that a little bit. So one of the things that we're thinking about is the marina. If there can be an elevation certificate obtained on that shows that it's not in the floodplain, then we feel that would be legitimate use of TIF dollars to spend on some of those properties. This stuff here, I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's protected by urban design levy, but it is, there's some agreements in place that nothing will happen there.
Okay. And this is the first time I've seen the map as
Yes.
well. So these areas, the areas outside of the city boundaries and the floodplain, we'll be looking at those and we'll go back to you with that, whether or not they can be
Laying this out in the middle of the table.
Put these two little ones down there so they can see.
Yeah, we'll
Are
get
they the same?
So, I don't know if you all were able to see that map. Maybe when it's close to the study, we'll look carefully.
Yeah, this is vacant structures and this portion.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not in it. No,
So is there, once again, is there anyone that has property within that area, owns property or a business within that area?
I do have a business in the area, but I don't own the building.
Your house is also in the area?
My house is
I
not
don't think it's in
included.
there.
Oh, okay.
It's out of it.
Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about your business being in that area. For purposes of this evening tonight, due to conflict of interest rules, I would like you to abstain from any votes tonight. And then we'll talk more about your property and whether or not you can participate in voting in issues.
My property that I own?
Even your business,
You just,
Okay.
okay?
Okay, and I certainly will agree to that, but let the record show that I object on the whole.
the marina properties, there, I don't know if there's some, on the ownership on that.
Chauncey, I'll clarify that, even though I've spoke up in previous, my name is not on any, it's in other names. So my name is not on the marina, even though I have an interest with people that are, but my name's not on any. For various reasons.
Okay. Tom, you want me to talk about the plan?
Please do.
Okay, we passed the map around, and as you can see, it's a fairly large area. The 570-some acres of property within the boundaries of the TIF. And that's broken into 353 separate parcels. What this plan is primarily looking at is a number of things. We're looking at a way to stabilize the downtown. As many of you know, been living here for a while, there's a number of buildings and that have started to decline. There's a number of buildings down there that need some help to bring them back. And part of this plan calls for the establishment of a building stabilization rehabilitation grant or loan program. And quite a bit of money has been set aside for that. About $2.5 million is what the dollar amount for that project, for those projects would be. And that could be for a number of different buildings. We're also looking at some streetscape improvements, signage, electric utilities, looking at streets and sidewalks, parking lot improvements, water, sewer, stormwater, environmental remediation, some building improvements outside of the, the commercial buildings. One of the big issues that the committee had talked about was the construction of an RV park. The idea being that there's a lot of people, a lot of tourists coming in, and if there'd be a possibility of having an RV park somewhere serving the downtown area, we think it might be a good tourism draw. And also there'll be some property acquisition and related professional costs like engineering, architectural planning, and legal. The total TIF amount for the overall project is $13,368,750. And that is, those costs are broken out in detail on page, I think 25 in your plan. So if you want to look at some of those detailed items on what we're discussing, and you see on page 25 we have it broken out as the 2013 redevelopment project, and then other redevelopment projects. What the intent is to activate this entire area upon recommendation from the commission and adoption by the city, and also to adopt that 2013 redevelopment plan. And that includes some $8,193,750 worth of projects. And we have all of those projects listed on page 25. The intent is on the building stabilization and rehabilitation project is that would be for your larger commercial projects, buildings that would be brought back. We're also talking, though, some smaller rehabilitation projects of possibly some of the residential structures that are within the TIF district. And one of the issues that was brought up when we talked about residential structures is the burden that might place upon the taxing jurisdictions. So on page 26, we put some language in here at the bottom of page 26 that we think will protect those interests. And I'll paraphrase it here, what we're basically talking about is that unless it's a historical building that's being brought back and utilizing it as, to bring back and put some money into rehabbing an historical structure that is contributing to the historic district, then any residential development beyond that, those increments would be passed through, declared surplus by the city and passed back through to the taxing jurisdictions. So I think that was some stuff we had some major discussion on a while back. Let's see, where am I at here? One of the, what we're thinking is, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this draft yet to clean it up. We want to be sure that we all agree on the boundaries of the TIF. If we need to amend those or adjust those somewhat, we want to do so. And for that reason, I didn't put together a detailed description. When you look at that, I started to put a detailed description together, and I thought, nah, just wait until we get a little more comfortable with what the area actually is, because it's kind of hard to write that description the way it's laid out right now. And what we when you look at the overall outlay of the parcels that we're showing, On page 7, we have a detailed breakout on what kind of property we're looking at. Single-family residential, there's 115 of those listed in this district. 112 commercial properties, 6 industrial, and a whole lot of vacant and agricultural. 68 properties are vacant or agricultural. We feel this is a conservation area rather than a blighted area. We think we could qualify it as a blighted area, but we also feel that when we went out and did the land use, there's a lot of properties out there that are just on the verge. You know, if we don't do something, they'll probably continue to decline. And so we think that with some attention, that this could be halted from becoming a blighted area. And so we feel as though it's certainly going to qualify as a conservation area. So that's how we're going to plan on writing this up. Now I have some serious detail here, and I've got a couple more maps to pass around. This one shows the vacant structures. When I say vacant, I'm talking these are lots that have structures on them, but they're vacant now. The bigger map shows the ones that are either agricultural or vacant. So also we went ahead and we did a building conditions inventory, and we classified these in 4 categories. We classified them as good to sound, deteriorated, or dilapidated. And we felt that there were 4 buildings that are out there that are actually dilapidated. Now, probably won't be able to tear them down due to the historical nature of some of them, but they are pretty well beyond some repair. We also found 41 of them that we considered to be pretty seriously deteriorated. And then there's 124 of the buildings that are in some stage of deterioration. And 94, though, we felt were really sound to good. So there's some help, I think, that's needed in the overall downtown to keep it from deteriorating further. Yeah, you can pass it around. Sorry. Again, the maximum TIF amount that we've been discussing, $13,368,750, and broken out into the 2013 redevelopment project of $8,193,750. And I don't know, I'd be happy to address any single issue, I suppose, but or anything you'd all like to talk about, but that's pretty much an overview of where we're at.
Is there any provision for new construction?
What?
Any provision for new construction? There are some vacant parcels of ground within the TIF that are suitable for revenue-producing uses.
Yes.
And I don't see anything substantially in projected uses that cover new construction.
I don't, other than the infrastructure that would go to serve it, I did not address that.
It is an eligible cost under TIF. It is an eligible cost under TIF.
Under statute, if it isn't addressed in the proposal, it becomes problematic.
We could add it.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah. Yeah, we looked at building stabilization and rehabilitation, but we did not address, any new construction. Now, we do have in there some property acquisition, so we could, I guess, from that perspective, look at that. or we could add a line item.
Chauncey, I think it may be important, especially in the fact if we would, if the marina would annex in, there could be some use maybe for some dollars for new construction costs out there, depending upon what the development might be.
New construction.
Wouldn't you, I mean, we're nothing there now. That would be one area where I could see definitely good use.
I guess demolition also.
Chauncey, I got a question for you. When we did our lower TIF back in July, Mark Spikerman from Gilmoreville made the statement that residential should not be included in a TIF. What is the difference in this? And, I mean, a TIF's a TIF.
Well, Mark Spikerman is an associate in my office. Residential TIFs are permitted. The issue with residential property being put into a TIF is the property tax. And mostly the impact that it has on the school district. Because the incremental property tax is generated as assessed valuation goes up, any new property taxes generated on that residential property is diverted to pay for the project. And so you have potentially, well, specifically for new residential projects, you have new residential homes coming in, kids coming in with those families, and no property taxes to pay for those additional children in their schools. So that's the issue that is really dealt with.
But not just a school, but any taxing entity would be affected by it.
Exactly, but the school district mostly because they don't impose sales taxes. And so, but it would impact anyone that imposes a property tax.
Commissioner, that was the reason that the wording was chosen as it was, to look at historical homes only. You know, and anything beyond that, that would be declared surplus and pass through. Dick, Mayor?
One of our objectives that we had in developing that was certainly for as you say, the historic structures. We think we're in line, we hope anyway, for a national park here, and the whole downtown area could be considered an affiliated area. We felt that it was important that those structures be preserved, again, as part of the community, as historic structures. So that's why we wanted those historic structures included into the TIF. Now, whether they end up being somebody living in them or not, I guess that could be somewhat of an issue. But I think the real concern was not necessarily the residences, but really the historic structures that may be residences.
Or some are in private ownership.
If they're in private ownership, right. But we have to try to preserve them if we possibly can.
Let me get back to this new commercial construction and demolition. What kind of, if you all want to put that in, what kind of dollar amount would you like to add to that?
Give us your thoughts a little bit on what kind of dollar amounts we should consider. I mean, we're all brand new and wanting to have an idea. We don't have any specific shovel-ready projects to compare it to. So what dollar amount? Do we have to take away from
No, you can.
another line item, or we can add to
No, you can add to it.
So what does it cost for a new apartment building to be built, or a new shopping center? And I don't think that's really on our list, but
New shopping center, you're probably gonna, down here, you're probably looking at, what, $4 to $5 million, I guess?
Say 425?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair. We've had some interest in the marina property for industrial purposes. Plant that employs 20, 30 people, and it's $1.5 million. You just don't know, but I mean, that's the kind of thing you have to anticipate.
You want to put a budget item in like put 5 million in for a budget item?
Well, can't we do that and then amend it at a later date, or once it's in there, it's in there?
You'd like to go ahead and have a number that you don't think you're ever going to go over.
Exceed.
What are the negative impacts of putting a $5 million number there? None?
Is that just that one project, Chauncey, that's what you're talking, or the multiple of them?
I think if you put it in as new commercial development, you could have multiple projects.
At that total cost?
Small.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not a total of all, but there's a single project.
No, total of all.
That's not a lot of money.
I would put it in, pick a number. I mean, we just need to put something in there.
I mean, we know we've got the potential marina site. Got this field included over here because nobody knows what its future is, but it could be commercial.
Given the length of the project, I'd feel probably more comfortable in the neighborhood of 8 million, because you don't know.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean, if we're gonna shoot for something we probably want to exceed, that would be the
okay.
belt line. Does anybody disagree with that thought?
Demolition,
It's a separate line item.
yeah, I'd put demolition in for a separate line item, probably, what, $500,000?
That isn't go very far either. So come in and buy a built best property.
Well, that's true.
And more demolition and new construction there.
There's a couple other buildings that are pretty good size if that had to happen. I would say probably 1.5 times.
I think it's just pretty number. If there's no negative connotation to it, I think it's a number that suffices a couple $1 million or whatever the building things.
Jerry, what do you think about that?
What do we call it, demolition site development?
$1.5 to 2?
Number.
It's a number, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
But it's a number, if we set it in stone tonight, we're done with it.
that's my understanding, pretty much.
Well, come back.
Well,
Well, yeah.
next couple of months anyway.
Yeah.
We
If
got
you do
how
some
we
research and
adopt it,
find out that it needs to
It could
be,
be if we see that there's a need for more, we can up it then.
Absolutely.
Not set in stone.
But how about demolition and site development at $3 million?
Okay, that's a pretty good one.
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully that if there are people out there that are anticipating projects, this will entice them to get in here and get this funding that's available as a first come, first served opportunity.
Any thoughts on if that would be included then with the 2013 redevelopment project, or do we want to come back and reconvene and when one of these bigger projects happen, reconvene and look at it then? Or, it's your all's call. You got a better
So
feel on what might happen?
if we put these numbers in now and we have an opportunity for a big development project, we can come in with the information from that single project and make an amendment. Is that what you just said?
Any amendment to this plan would require this commission, well, not any amendment, any large-scale amendment, where you're modifying the project scope. You're going from an $8 million project to a $15 million project. Would require the TIF commission to be reconvened, a new public hearing held, and the process started.
And then it would have to also go through the board,
Yes.
the city board?
Right.
Okay.
So these changes, and just so you're aware, we're going to ask later tonight that you all set your public hearing for this plan. I believe March 4th, is that date changed at all? March 4th is the date we're fixing. Up until about a week prior to that public hearing, you can make changes to this plan. So you can, we know you all received a lot of information tonight, so we can have more meetings, we can talk about it more. I would recommend you all go home and study this and make suggestions. So.
Can you talk a little bit, Shannon, about the redevelopment project? You know, it's talking about, like we said, the 2013 redevelopment project. And what that means is this plan will address what we think is going to happen first. You know, and scheduling it doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to happen in 2013, but that would be the project that we're adopting or plan on adopting. And then if there's going to be some additional projects going forward, you know, after that, then we'll probably reconvene and have another public hearing for that project.
Right.
Can you talk about why we have to do that?
Well, first of all, just so you know, under the TIF Act, you have a 10-year limitation to initiate any redevelopment project. Again, 2013, I would probably recommend this be a redevelopment project A, so that there's not a tie to a year when folks think that this project is going to happen.
Yeah.
This plan, again, would be in place for 23 years, and the clock starts, the 23-year clock on the increment starts when that redevelopment project is approved. So if you can have seven, is that what you're thinking, 2 RPAs? You're having one RPA, which is a redevelopment project area, which is redevelopment project. The 2013 redevelopment project has a 23-year clock. Okay, then your second project would have another 23-year clock. Okay, but you have a 10-year limit, so you cannot initiate a project, approve a project beyond 10 years after the first project is adopted. Is that clear? So essentially, a plan can be in place for up to 33 years if it has multiple projects involved.
Can you outline the process, let's say hypothetically that it's a business located inside this TIF area and they're interested in making improvements to their property, how soon after this is approved and the city moves to adopt it, how soon can they start and what would be their process from the small business perspective?
This is, we have implemented these types of grant loan programs in other communities in the area, and what we prepare for the municipality is a loan application and a form redevelopment agreement that the city would enter into with that business owner, is setting forth the obligations of that business owner in terms of what will be required in order to receive this assistance, this TIF money. So the city would initiate, have an advertisement, letting folks know, businesses know that this grant program is available, have applications on file, take in applications. If the city would like to approve the application, enter into this agreement. Now, once the city adopts this plan, if they do adopt this plan, increment will take a few months because there will be a base. The base will need to be set. You probably won't see any increment for a year or so because the assessed valuation won't have increased. You have existing buildings, you have a set assessed valuation, right now a pretty stable one. So in order to get an increment, you're going to have to see an increase. And so new sales tax dollars coming in, new property values increasing. So it may take a little time before money's available for a program. Okay?
Can it be done on a reimbursement basis?
Yes. So if the city wanted, or the business owner wanted to front the cash for that project, they could do that. In that situation, I would recommend giving a note, like an IOU, that says if and when increments are generated, we will reimburse you for those costs. If there's no increment generated, we're not obligated to reimburse you.
And that is what the committee discussed as being the base model for this program, since the city is not going to incur debt in order to implement the TIF. and nor do we have seed money sitting around available for someone to borrow from the city. We had hoped that this kind of recapture agreement would be the kind of incentive that the city could offer. The critical point here, the one that Shannon stated so eloquently, you're only going to be able to recapture your TIF-approved expenses from the revenues you generate. So if a person has a good project, they will generate an increment and they will be able to recapture under the note. If you have a marginal or bad project, you're not going to get paid back. And the person who went down the street and undertook a project that is successful, the revenues they generate are not going to be used to compensate you for your failing project. So we're going to segregate these projects. We're going to make sure that the cash flows to the ones that work, and hopefully they'll all work. At some point, we expect the increment to rise, both the property tax and hopefully the sales tax, above the level necessary for the city to meet those note obligations. And to the extent that it does, we would then be able to make infrastructure improvements unrelated to specific projects, or perhaps fund a loan program, a low-interest loan program, or whatever. But that's going to take a while.
I got to comment on what you just said. I understand how the businesses are going to work. How are you going to recoup the money going into residential houses?
Is that through the property tax increase?
The city will have no front-loaded monies to loan.
But how's he going to recoup that? How's he going to pay it off?
It'd only be by the property tax increment. And frankly, I don't see a residential project getting done.
That's my only problem with it.
Well, anyway, somebody comes up with a grand plan and can make it work, but generally, the residential tax increment isn't enough to pay a note of $100,000 at 5% for 20 years. It's just not going to happen.
And I just want to make clear again that the redevelopment plan is a framework. It's very generic. The specifics that you're talking about in terms of a residential project versus increment being generated from a specific business going back to repay their note, all of that would be placed into a redevelopment agreement, which would be project specific and adopted by the city the city with the business owner, with the residential developer.
Yeah. And I only make that statement because people hear TIF, and we've all read horror stories about how they've been used and abused. And I think we come up with a plan here that avoids a lot of the pitfalls that we envision when we hear the term TIF. A question was asked of me earlier. I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask it, but I'm going to, even though the person who asked it left.
You got a meeting.
The city has been discussing, and the board will vote tomorrow night whether to put on the ballot an election for a general tax revenue increase that will be intended for replacing fire apparatus. And it would be a 0.135 or some increase in our general revenue tax. If the TIF is established and this vote takes place in April, is that new tax applicable to the properties within the TIF?
I will give you an answer, but it's not going to be a direct answer.
You can not answer it and offer to get back to me.
I will,
Okay.
but I will tell you, it depends on how your county, where you're located. For example, in St. Louis County, they set base sales taxes, tax by tax, okay? So if there's a capital improvement sales tax, and a transportation sales tax, and some other tax in place when the TIF is adopted, that is the base that they set, okay? And each tax has a base. If a new tax comes in, is imposed later, that tax has no base in Sellers County. Okay? And so essentially, 50% of that, all that new revenue goes to the project. So that's in St. Louis County. And I know, I think in Kansas City, they do that as well. They do. In other areas, they do it based on the overall tax generation. So all of the taxes are calculated up, and this is how much revenue was generated from sales taxes the year prior to the adoption of TIF, and that's your base. So no matter what taxes are, fall off, come back on, or whatever, your base is set. And so anything above that is incremental. So I will have to find out how it will work. But Chauncey just said it's tax by tax. So.
Can I ask a question going back to what you asked? Even though our hearing's not till March, if somebody starts to proceed on fixing up their business or doing a new business or whatever, they still can't qualify. They don't have to wait till after this is all done.
I would recommend that they not start. If they have to start, they have to start. There's two issues. One, you have certain findings relating to the conservation area, and that was a large area. This could be one small building. In a smaller context, that development starting may impact whether or not the area meets a conservation finding. Okay? There's no bright line test. It's never been tested. I would recommend that they not start until after the plan is approved.
I'm going to ask one more question.
Okay.
Isn't the taxes based on your previous year? Let's say you had an existing business. So if you play along and this takes 3 or 4 months and you don't open your business in physical year 2013, and you haven't had a business in that year, then what's your tax base start out at? 0?
As a business?
Yes.
You pay your taxes just like you would normally pay your taxes.
Sales
As
tax.
a business.
Even if it's a year down the road or whatever.
Right.
On your previous sales tax, no matter if it's a year or 2 ago.
Now, TIF is not a new tax. For business owners, residential property owners, you are not going to see a change in your tax bills. If the city imposes an additional sales tax, you're going to see that on your receipt. But you, as a consumer, as a taxpayer, are not going to know how that revenue is split once it's collected. And that's what will happen.
Yeah, Ryan, let me address that a little bit further. The base will be an aggregate for all of the businesses, all of the business that had sales tax that prior calendar year 2012. So all of those businesses combined will form what the base is. So.
Say that again.
The actual sales tax base will be determined by a combination of all of the businesses in aggregate. That forms the base, so that the county or the ambulance district, if they choose to participate, or the city doesn't get hurt. So they'll continue to collect the money from that base, and then the new businesses coming in and the existing ones that are still there, before any increment occurs, that base will have to be hit. Now, when you talk about, what Martin was talking about a while ago, each business will have to stand on its own.
Right, that's where I was headed.
But the issue that's going to have to be addressed is that base will have to be hit before any increment occurs.
And each business will have to understand that that's a risk.
The aggregate base has to be met first.
Right.
And then we fall back to the individual properties.
Right.
I see, okay.
Gotcha.
I understand. I apologize. Maybe I didn't catch the nuance of your question. And that may be addressed in the redevelopment agreement, where an individual business owner, in order to receive the incentive, they have to reach a certain base amount, what they generated prior. And
all properties will have to reach that level.
Right.
Before anybody gets collected, because there's no increment.
Right,
Beyond that, you're going to be entitled to the increment you generate.
right.
There won't be much cash flowing that first half of the year, shall we say.
But there, if a major business collects no sales tax in 2013, then opens in 14, that particular business shows a zero sales tax because that's the prior year.
No,
So that lowers the average?
no.
That's kind of what I was getting at, Gary.
No, again, we're talking two different items here. The first item we have to address is before any increment happens in the year 2013, assuming we adopt the plan in 2013, the base for all of 2012 will have to be hit.
Okay.
Okay, and now, after that's happened, those individual businesses, as Martin explained, who have an agreement in place, then they will start to collect their money upon what happened, whatever increment they're generating is what will go to them.
So though, if they did no business in 2013, they will go with the average in that area, or will they go from zero for sales tax?
So if
I mean, for a specific
It's a new
business,
business.
For a specific business,
I think we have to just figure out how to handle that situation.
Yeah.
To determine when, at what point their benefit starts coming back. to
right,
them.
right.
But again, that's part of the
Part of the redevelopment agreement,
redevelopment agreement.
Right.
that will have to be formed
We
with that
will need to
individual.
adopt uniform standards that we apply to every applicant.
Right.
Precisely.
I'm going to ask another question out on that. If there's a business owned by another person that's a similar type business, and they take a year and a half or so, do they start at zero since they haven't been in business? Or do they go back on the business that's been there for 100 years?
Well, the way it stands now, it'd be 2012.
Do what?
It really doesn't have anything to do with who owns what when.
Well, I'm
It's-
not sure I understand it.
Well,
This isn't, so I think the question that I want to pop with your question
Yeah.
is, if the business changes hands, what happens to the TIF agreement?
If they take over a year
It's
to
in
get that
place.
business back going.
Well, again, all of that would be addressed. I
Okay.
mean, to be
Right.
honest with you, I think that.
Some standards, I guess.
It would be, if this plan is adopted, the agreement, we would work with the city creating a form agreement. And that application, advertisement, loan program guidelines, to the extent you want us to. And we can pull from different types of agreements we've had in other municipalities where we set standards, anticipating that a business might leave, what would happen in that situation. And
So I think back to the initial question, if this is a brand-new business that had, from a sales tax standpoint only, had a zero base in 2012.
I mean, if it's a new business, it's a policy decision.
Okay.
So
So
there's no
these are the-
standard.
These
There's
will
no-
be the details that
Yes,
we will work out.
yes. I mean, this will be a Board of Aldermen decision as to what the policy will be. And there are no legal standards. When I was talking earlier about increment, that is a statutory process. That's how money gets into a TIF. But how that money is used, how it is applied, is specifics that are set forth in the redevelopment agreement, which is purely a policy decision made up by the mayor and the board of aldermen.
I'll ask one more question, and maybe I'll shut up. But let's say somebody's wanting to buy a business or start a business in town. How long is it going to be? I know our hearing's in March before there's going to be a TIF available that they could comply with if they can't back into it. Let's say somebody buys something in the next 30 days, and yet we're not ready, and you just said they can't back into it, or you're not advising that. How long is it going to be before we're able to accommodate someone?
Well, if the public hearing is in March, we will ask this commission to make their recommendation within a 30-day period. The city has a 2-week wait requirement. After that, recommendation is made to consider the plan. At that point, now during this process, we can start working on this redevelopment agreement and have all of those types of, those details. We can be working on those simultaneously as we're walking through this process. There's a large, there's a time schedule on page 22 of your plans, which show that there are several notices that have to go out for the public hearing. And so we'll begin those tomorrow. But during this process, we can start working through all those details. And I would say that, you know, within, what do we have here? Beginning of April, yeah, by the 1st of April, the plan could be adopted. The business owner could be, the city could be in a position to enter into an agreement with the business owner.
It could be made.
Yeah, there won't be increment to reimburse that business owner, but they could enter into an agreement where the business owner fronts the money and the city agrees when increment is generated in the future to reimburse them.
We have a question in the back.
Yeah, I understand that the special allocation fund will receive up to 50% of the increment on the sales tax. Now, am I to understand that that will occur automatically?
Once the base is hit, the Department of Revenue, the city would notify the Department of Revenue and taxing districts. And how it's collected is it depends on where you're located. Depending on the county, it changes, but once...
I just want to follow up, because what I visualize here is that, let's suppose you have a real small, little tiny commercial development that has no tax base. The sales tax generated by that little development, in some respects, might be tied to that owner getting reimbursed on a loan, or a promissory note, where the city says, if you generate taxes above whatever that location generated in the past as far as sales tax goes, the agreement would allow reimbursing you for your outgo, for doing the work that you said you were going to do. But from a more global standpoint, is it true that the special allocation fund would have actually cash in it generated using the entire sales tax footprint that could be used downstream to actually make loans or used to issue bonds and do other projects?
That is correct. I would caution the special allocation fund, you have to meet the base first for the entire area before an increment is put into the special allocation fund. But the city attorney has it correct that, you know, if the city wanted to loan money, there could be monies available in the special allocation fund to do that.
And can we talk about the real estate tax issue? That if a real estate tax is voted in after the establishment of the plan or project, is the new real estate tax captured?
Yeah.
Yes. So if you, from a real estate standpoint, so you have assessed valuation at X dollars, you apply your property tax rate now, you know, per $100,000 of assessed valuation, and you have a dollar amount. That's your base. as assessed valuation goes up, the new rate, whatever it is in any year, is applied to the base assessed valuation and the essentially incremental assessed valuation. So the top portion, the increment, is 100% captured by TIF, and then the bottom, the base, is redirected back to the taxing districts to impose that levy.
Can this process declare real estate taxes captured as surplus, or does that have to be built into the plan of the project?
What we did with that is, I know there was some specific language we've been told to always use, is that there an amount equivalent to those taxes that would have been on real estate. An amount equivalent to, because they'd be coming out of the overall special allocation fund. Some of that might be each, some of it might be pilots. But that amount equivalent to would be declared surplus on an annual basis.
I guess what I'm getting at is, if the city's looking at voting on a real estate tax that's targeted for a special need of the city. And at the same time, parallel to it, we're talking about forming this entity that is kind of like a horse race. We need to make sure that we coordinate so that this new special tax isn't captured. Otherwise, we won't be able to use it for that special purpose. Won't have it.
Well, from a real estate tax, it really doesn't matter. It's the assessed valuation that really matters. The tax itself, Frank, I think, Chauncey, do you know about this new tax? I think it might be good to sit down with the city.
Yes.
and look at your, either your new sales taxes that are coming on or your new real estate taxes that are coming on, and see how it would impact.
My understanding, though, Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong, let's assume you have your overall assessed value in this TIF is, say, $1 million. And I don't know what it is yet, because we haven't run those numbers. That $1 million of assessed value, that new property tax, the city will collect the property tax on that base of $1 million.
Correct.
The only thing that they would be giving up would be the increase above $1 million that would be coming in after development occurs.
Right.
And that's the question that we were asking earlier, at first, is if we add a factor to our general revenue figure.
Well, I was confused. I was thinking sales tax, general revenue,
Okay.
and not real estate.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, let's talk
They
about
talked about it first, though. That was what they said, talked about, they didn't talk about real estate first.
Yeah.
So that's legitimate.
So that's a discussion that will take place with the city to understand better, so we don't have to do the horse race like Frank was talking about.
Tom, may I ask a question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Personally, I think the way this plan relates to businesses, small businesses, potential businesses, is probably the easy part. On page 23 are the dreaded words in paragraph 1, eminent domain. And below that, with land acquisition and disposition and relocation assistance. I understand sitting here and thumbing through this and hearing it for the first time, as all of us are, that this is primarily geared as an economic development tool. That's what we're all looking at, what the mayor talked about with the potential of the affiliated area for the National Park Service. What assurances can this commission at this time give the proverbial little old lady in a small residential home that her or his specific real estate property taxes will not be affected if they don't improve their building, that their taxes won't go up just because this plan is in place?
This,
This is not a new tax.
it's not, yeah, there is no impact.
I think we need to keep saying that over and over
That
again.
could create some confusion for people who don't understand.
Well, I think that, as Chauncey has spoken about and Martin has spoken about as well, and in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have been asked by a lot of people, I've been approached by a lot of people, and they explain to me how this TIF is going to work. And they have no idea, because we have yet to determine how this TIF is going to work. So I think that it's going to be very important that when this commission's recommendations go to the Board of Aldermen, that it's very clear, and that we train the board and make sure that they understand what they're voting on, and make sure that they can go out and tell their constituents clearly how this TIF is developed and how it works, not with any other spin. This is exactly, I think we should make up a hand card to give people.
And
say,
it should be included at the
"This is
public
how this
hearing
works."
at the door when you walk in.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, the answer to your question is zero impact.
Yes.
And I knew you knew that, but yeah, it's an excellent point, and I think that's the point to be taken is the education of the public, and to make everyone aware in clear terms. I think to say simple terms would be to insult people. I think in clear terms of this is how this program works. It will be very, very interesting going forward to draw these details together. But after those details are together, that's when our opportunity to allow the public to understand exactly how this works and have no fear. Mr. Mayor?
Well, one thing to remember though, her taxes could go up just as anybody else's does.
But
Yes.
not
TIF
because of
doesn't
the TIF.
affect it.
But not because,
Not because of the TIF.
right. Thank you, Mayor.
Is that what-
Well, as the county assessor, I mean, your value's gonna go up based on what the market's doing. So if this TIF has created a positive thing, and her property's worth, the little old lady's property is worth more, her value's gonna go up. But we monitor that very closely.
I'm gonna add one more thing, and getting back to what I asked there earlier. If a small business is trying to get into business, like a service industry or something, this community has to depend on tourism for some of those businesses. They're gonna be too late waiting until April or May to get done what they wanna get done. So, where they can't back into this, and I understand, I kinda caught it before, you said they could possibly back in, but if they can't back in and they can't start their project till April or May, some of them that I know that are interested, they're not gonna be ready for the tourism season because of this 2 or 3 month wait. And you say they can't back in. Or is that gonna be decided upon here? I'm thinking about.
Let's get this
for-
question first.
Well, I'm trying to answer, I think, I might be getting confused by your question, but nothing can be dealt with until the base is established first.
Yeah.
Well,
Even if I wanted the money now, we don't know how much that would
right,
be.
I
That
mean,
won't
the
help
city-
anybody this year.
No, right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's not.
Well, and the city, I mean, they would be implementing a program, but not, I mean, this wouldn't have been approved yet, but they'd have to
Yeah.
approve a redevelopment agreement
Right.
before a redevelopment plan is
Right.
approved. So,
Which kind of got back to the other questions about the basis of what the income was out of that property for the year 2012, if they don't get in business till 2014, but we answered that, I think.
Let's continue this discussion a little bit if we could.
Please.
If someone owns a building, you know, or is buying a building, and as long as they don't anticipate getting any TIF reimbursement, you know, for the purchase price of that building, that doesn't mean that they can't go in and buy the building today. You know, people are buying stuff all the time, you know, as a future investment, you know, say. But if they're wanting to get TIF reimbursement, I don't think anybody's going to be real comfortable with them completing their redevelopment project and doing all of that stuff, and now come back, you know, 2 or 3 months later and say, hey, we want to get reimbursed for this. I don't think that would work that way, would it?
You know.
So there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, not this year. We're getting this in place and it'll be up and ready to go next year. I don't think there's a problem with telling businesses
Yeah,
that.
well,
It
yeah,
wouldn't be surprising if they had more than one project.
I agree. I
Right.
think that we'd have
That's
a
your-
real hard
that's
time
all.
back, trying to develop something that is reasonable to back in. If there's bad timing, there may be a little bit of bad timing.
So be
I hate
it.
to
You have to look at the
Martin,
future.
these are probably too many
Yeah,
details
so be it if it's
for
bad
this,
timing.
this meeting, but
Yeah,
I own the building, and I'm not seeking reimbursement for the cost of the building. And let's say I demolish, but I don't make any improvements. And I don't expect to recapture any of my demolition. As long as I haven't done any of the work for which I'm asking to recapture, I think we're okay. It's just, if you made that expenditure, if you didn't want to enter into an agreement to recapture, is where the problem lies.
yeah, and let's move forward and try to get through the rest of the meeting before we burn the clock up, please.
The one thing I would like to get accomplished tonight is for people to look at the boundaries of this TIF and say, yes, this makes sense, this is what we want to do. Or say, hey, you guys are nuts, let's cut this back, or let's add this. So can we look at that as a group and maybe get some input from the city as well and say the boundaries make sense, or do we need to pare it back
The
some?
only thing I'd like to, based on our prior meetings, there was some discussion of the park grounds that are not part of this. And I think there was some discussion as to whether that's something we should look at.
You can spend money, TIF money outside of their boundaries. TIFs are not required to spend money within their boundaries. So if there are improvements that would benefit the TIF district as a whole, we're comfortable with you spending money outside your boundaries. So if the park would benefit the TIF
Yeah, we're
district,
talking about
they don't
using it as
necessarily need to
something
be
other
in
than
the
a park.
district. Right.
If the boundary isn't set exactly.
So, Johnson, preliminary schedule events.
If I am, if you all are. The reason I'm asking for the boundaries is,
Many meetings we had, it was discussed this area as to whether or not to pick up the park. Sure. And I don't know why, except for the fact that maybe there's a better place for a park and that could be used for something.
This is an area though that you're in for.
Like a restaurant.
Yeah.
Very focused and specific questions from,
What,
we don't want
But I think then I understand we can
pointing
add
right
that
here
as
to
information.
the proposed small
The proposed small
site
park
for the
area.
national park.
And well off the national.
Oh, you're talking about.
City park. Oh, the city park. I'm
still like
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
let's just have.
And I understand.
I don't want to address the area as a group when there is
Add
one.
that in.
Prior to that.
It doesn't add anything, there's no text value to it. It doesn't add anything to the TIF and increase the base from this. The question is, if somebody wanted to use that for some really purpose, and willing to spend a lot of money for it, we could put
Still got half of this month.
the newer, better parks.
But then I understand as information, we could add something.
Have at it, go that way.
You just have another public hearing.
Have to have another public hearing.
Just kind of go through the
What, do
process.
you want to do it on another Tuesday, or?
No, it would take.
What you said was that
I'm not here next
to
Tuesday.
benefit the TIF area, you can spend money outside the area. And so,
She's talking about like a public.
But you do have to reconvene.
Mondays are good for
to
me.
Make that decision and act on it and vote on it.
That
Jerry?
statement generally comes to,
Mondays
and I
work
go
for
out
you
a
for our
mile and a
next
half, and I go and bring a
That'd
sewer
be good.
line,
What
and
about
TIF down there. Is that an, yes, that's a legitimate expense. But only that portion of it, so if anybody else kind of connects to it, whatever portion was, they benefit, is not recaptured.
So,
there you go. I figured.
You didn't make a smaller burden.
Yeah. Okay, everybody good with the Monday,
About the 28th.
the 28th?
Oh, 2 weeks.
Give us, I'd like to go through this and read a little more and understand a little more before we have our next meeting too. 'Cause
Monday the
Give
28th.
us 2 weeks.
Monday the 28th?
Should be okay.
So I think I got
Do you have a schedule?
6 p.m.? 6 p.m.?
Okay,
Jerry,
say-
6
I'm sorry, I
p.m.?
couldn't hear you. You guys, 6 PM on the
Yeah,
Monday the 28th.
Monday the 28th.
28th.
Is that like
6
a
p.m.
work session?
In this room right here?
Yeah.
That'd be a work session.
Work session?
from today.
Yeah.
Works for us, because we'll be in Jefferson City.
And then would you like to set the public hearing date for March the 4th?
Right.
Do we need to get a motion and pass that?
Well, can't we do that at the next January meeting? Or you want to do it now?
Need to send a notice tomorrow.
Get it done? Right, you make it on second.
No, you can't do that.
You can, as chair. I could
I
make a
can.
motion
Make a motion.
Well, yeah,
to propose the March 4th
second.
Can we get the audience
public
involved?
hearing.
And I second that.
Any discussion? The motion is made and seconded.
Yeah, Tom.
I don't think they're not.
Did you ask if there's any more discussion?
No, we just made a motion.
For the public notice to be published on March the 4th.
The hearing to be conducted.
Public hearing.
The public hearing held on March the 4th
In this location.
at this location.
At what time?
6 PM,
6 p.m.
Okay.
March the 4th. There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And then do you want, there's not a need for a motion and a second for the next meeting? I don't know what the most.
We'd like to propose the next scheduled meeting for this commission on Monday.
You can't do that.
January the 28th.
You
at
can't
6 p.m.
Oh, it's not a motion. Oh, it's proposed.
You don't need a motion.
No, it's just a proposal.
Okay.
Is that gonna work for everyone, or most everyone? In this, right here in this room, at 6 PM on Monday the 28th, 2 weeks from yesterday. That gives us time to absorb the information that we have, formulate our questions, so when we come to the meeting, we'll have focused questions and be able to make good progress.
Right. Again, you have my contact information. If you want to submit questions prior to that meeting in writing, we can have prepared responses or, so that's an option as well. To other Johnson
Earlier, Johnson, we're gonna have some further questions.
The county and ambulance district, if they choose to participate, what do you discuss?
Yeah.
Well, currently the statute is, the TIF statute is a little unclear about emergency service districts, and how their participation, what increment that they are required to generate or to give to a TIF. What we propose is that, and what we recommend is that the city enter into agreements with each of the emergency service districts to make it clear as to the level of your increment and your costs.
Further discussion?
Before the meeting would come to an end, I have a concern as the county assessor with 353 parcels being in this proposed project. I'm concerned about the appeals and the cost thereof. And the taxing entities have been wonderful to support me in these, but I think it's kind of asking a lot to ask them to support me in defense of values. And I would like for there to be consideration given in the agreement that the language be included that the cost to defend an appeal be considered as it is in our Chapter 100 agreement. That the county or any taxing entity doesn't, take a hit on that, because there's no way the county can defend or can pay for the defense of some of these big appeals. So I think that's something we need to think about.
Are there frequently appeals?
Well, no,
I don't understand that.
What, I'm sorry, what would be the base for an appeal?
The value,
Pardon me?
the value.
If someone's property's been, in their opinion, overvalued.
Yes.
I just think that they may want a lower base value going into a TIF.
I want to make clear that as a property owner, your assessed valuation is your assessed valuation, whether there's a TIF or not a TIF.
Right.
And so if your assessed valuation on your property increases, it's due to factors unrelated to this TIF, other than businesses are now, the economic development within the city is improving, and so property values are going up. That is one connection with the TIF, but that's part of the TIF. I don't see, in my experience, I haven't seen a lot of property tax or assessed valuation appeals simply because of a TIF.
Okay.
But you would like to ensure that
Yeah, I mean,
there's-
it's an incentive.
it's addressed.
Yes, and I would like it to be discussed and considered.
Can I ask a question of are you asking about ongoing appeals or prior to the plan being adopted appeals? Because I see maybe a business owner wanting to lower their assessed valuation before the plan is adopted and/or ongoing appeals?
Well, I don't have anything current that I'm concerned about.
So if the TIF is established and the base is 2012, have those values already been established?
2012, we're working on 2013.
All right, but for this purpose, the base would be 2012.
Would it be?
Yes.
The base is set as of the last year, the year prior to the adoption of TIF.
Okay.
So it would only be ongoing appeals then, in that
Well, somebody would have to try and go back and appeal 2 years.
So they
It's
can't,
established.
so no one could appeal then, because we're past the deadline to appeal for 2012. So there
Right,
can't
I mean,
be any
The appeal
appeals.
process is, that's your area of expertise, that is
Okay.
not mine.
Yeah, December 31st was
Okay,
the final deadline.
Just because there's a TIF does not mean that people can't appeal their property values. They can,
Right.
they will, I'm sure. There's just not a specific connection with the TIF related to that, in my experience. One thing that we could do, which could be addressed in the redevelopment agreement with a particular property owner, is say, if you are going to be a beneficiary of TIF, to provide for a process where, I don't like to put in language that they will not contest their values, but if they do, that the cost of that appeal process could be addressed. I mean, we could work something into that agreement. But, it is, that's up to the city, that's a policy decision for that.
I'm sensitive to her concern. I hope that if we do what we're doing, it won't be an issue, because the base will be the tax for which we are already beyond the appeal period. Whether anybody then would appeal a future tax, I don't know.
Well, in the Ozora TIF, under Article 6, I think it is, it says that they cannot appeal because of the incentives that they're given, that they cannot appeal. But there's an appeal right now going, because one of the properties is appealing. So that's why I brought it to your attention.
Well, I will definitely talk to the city more about that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussions?
Do you want to approve the boundaries now? Wasn't that something
128.
Chauncey wanted tonight?
Well, I would like it, but I mean, if you're ready to make a decision on that, that's fine, or if not, you can talk about it in a couple of weeks.
I know that several of you have never seen that map until
Right.
just this evening. You might want to look at it a little harder.
Yeah.
Or are you comfortable?
For me, representing 8 other types of entities, I'd like to be able to take that back to those other types of entities and show them and get their opinion on it before I actually make a vote on it.
From what standpoint?
To get their viewpoints, get their input, because I am voicing for 8 taxing entities.
Makes sense to me.
I can get you a copy. We can email them out, I guess, tomorrow. Right, did everybody get put their email on the sheet? And then we can send out a PDF of the area. Is it back there?
Pam, man.
Pam ran off.
Are there anything else on the agenda? We've scheduled the next meeting. We have any other business? Any other business? Someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Jerry, let me have that when you're done going.
You looking at something?
Notes here for us to get that down. Maybe even for information purposes, we'll do a call-in show.
Boy, he's not very good. Park out there somewhere. Figure they can do that.
Take care of yourself.